My name is Brendan Wee, and I'll be going over one of the big focuses of our last public release, which is our enhanced customized reporting within HECSTAB. Give a brief overview for the rest of the presentation. First, going to just start off with some basics on HECSTAB and Python and some of the scripting capabilities we already have built into HECSTAB. Look at the script editor and the capabilities in there, as well as the API help documentation to assist you in writing any of these Python scripts. And then we'll go into the real meat and bones of this webinar, which is the report API and our script-based reports. Start off by introducing the concept of script-based reports, kind of the concepts behind it and how they get built up. Then we'll look at a sample report and look at the different blocks that are needed to actually write a report script. And then finally go into HECSTAB and actually look at some of the samples we've built up and generate these reports for some sample projects. So just looking at a HECSTAB and Python overview, let's start off with the script editor in HECSTAB, which is a Python editor that we have built into HECSTAB that allows you to write and run scripts that range from very simple things like exporting data from conditions out to, say, a CSV file, to running a lot more complex stability analyses. On the graphic on the right, you'll see that we have the Python editor, which is available under the Tools tab in HECSTAB. And it gives kind of the same user interface with the ribbon bar up top, with tabs for quick tools and the panels down in the main window. If you're familiar at all with our analysis packages within HECSTAB, you'll know a lot of those are built up basically from Python scripts. So anything simple like creating damage cases from a box within the 3D graphic to a lot more of our complex ones like doing full SOLAS probabilistic damage analysis are all, for the most part, built up from Python scripts. And within kind of our existing Python library, we'll call it, we had two main API sets. The first one being the HECSOLVE API, which is a group of functions and variables which allow you to create, modify, and run conditions and ultimately access their output data. So these are a lot of the same things you can do in the main HECSTAB UI, such as adjusting calculation settings, changing loading for a given tank, or adding child conditions. And the second one being the ship API, which is more on the model side. So performing calculations relevant to the ship model, say doing hydrostatics at certain draft or doing a wind over turning moment. And also just accessing general vessel model information like compartment and hull data. In terms of writing these scripts, it can be a bit daunting to start out. And so that's why we've provided a set of code help to help users both know what API methods are available and what types of things you can do within a script, and also just generally how to use the different API methods. And so they'll give information like the calling convention, what the input parameters are into a method, and what data, if any, gets returned from a method. So this is available both directly within the editor. You'll see on the left, we have the full listing of the API methods available. And if you double click on any of these, the panel will show up directly within the editor with the relevant help information, or you can pop it out into a separate window, which is what's shown on the bottom right. And either method is really just a matter of preference in terms of your layout and workflow needs. The API help is a continuing and ongoing process of trying to improve and refine what help information we give. And so some examples of ways we're trying to improve this is adding code examples and snippets directly into the help information, which are just short couple line sections on how to actually use the method. And something we introduced or started to introduce in the last release is the idea of tracking breaking changes. So if we, for some reason, needed to rename a method or change the input parameters, we have begun adding that information into the help to let you know what has changed, if anything, to help convert older scripts. All this kind of leads into now our newest API set, which is the report API, which is of course the set of methods and variables that help users create reports from any of the available condition and model data within a project. We actually introduced this concept in one of our releases in late 2020. And so this last public release and this webinar are focusing on a lot of the improvements and rework that we've gone through in the past couple months leading up to this release. If you're familiar at all with the previous reporting methods, which was the flex reports, the script reports kind of phase out, or we began phasing them out when we originally introduced the script reports, and now are moving to fully replace them with this latest public release. And we've kind of moved away from the flex reports for sort of three main reasons. The first being that we recognized and wanted to adopt Python as a more widely used scripting language compared to how the flex reports were built up, which was a SQL database driven approach, which we realized wasn't too familiar for a lot of our users. The second and kind of biggest one being that we want to allow for more customization in terms of creating different report elements, especially concerning tables and plots. The previous flex reports were a very visual editor where things were set up and sort of inflexible in terms of what you could put into a table or into a plot. And finally, another big reason for moving away from the flex reports was now the ability to natively export as a .docx file or a Word file, so that these could be opened up in Word for any further modification, formatting, or just bringing into your own larger reports as needed. So kind of a brief conceptual part on kind of what's driving the document behind is our reports are built up on this concept of a document model. And this comes from an external library that we're leveraging to create these reports called Gembox Document. And so Gembox Document has a whole set of functions and other variables that create full Word documents essentially. And what we've done is we've taken what we've recognized as some of the more common elements, like creating paragraphs or creating tables, and create sort of helpers to be able to quickly generate those. But there is a full, much larger document library behind that we do give access to if you're interested in, say, more advanced formatting or other more complex Word elements. So looking at the document model, it's kind of like the way we like to see it is it's building it up like building blocks. You start off with your document model, which is your report. You can add sections to this document model, which dictate sort of the page settings and layout, as well as the different headers and footers. And then to these sections, you add what are aptly named blocks. And these blocks are the content of the report, say a paragraph or a picture or a table. And so within a report script, you're basically saying, I want to add a paragraph to the document. Then below it, I want to add a table, and just building the document top down. And we can see that here now, looking at a very simple report script shown here. And we'll take a look into each of the basic reports of writing a report script. The one at the very top being the import statements. In the middle, which is really the core of the report, which is the create report function. And then finally, this testing block to be able to debug your report scripts while you're in the process of writing them. Starting off with the first kind of basic part of really any Python script are the import statements. And if you're familiar with Python scripts, you'll know that the import statements are used to bring in any external libraries for use within your script. And so this top section here is, I think this is our standard sort of import block, which we add to any new scripts that you write within our editor. And so these are bringing in most of the common items from our HECSTAB code. So it's allowing you to access the different calc settings, damage properties, and tank properties, allowing you to bring in and look at and change the units. It's bringing in the HECSTAB API, and the one that's important for running these report scripts is bringing in the report API. Going back to this is usually something I think for the most part you won't have to touch. We try to give a standard set of report or import statements that most users will need for writing a lot more complex reports, and so you may need to add to this, and we can help with that. The next kind of main block into a report script is the create report method. And so this is, like I said, the main block used, and this is the part where we're adding the different building blocks to our report. It's important to note that this naming, the create_report naming of the method, is required to bring it into the print panel so that we can recognize that what we're doing here is creating a report. And there is a parameter that we can add to this. You'll see this IDs, which is an input parameter to the create reports method. And this is basically a list of condition IDs that you can bring in and use in the report to loop through. As I mentioned, this isn't required if you have something like a report that's just looking at model data, for instance. You don't need to add condition IDs. So that's something that can be dropped. And we'll just take a look at what this very simple report script is doing. So within the create report, the very first step is we're adding a header to our document. So this is just our add header default, which adds some license information and program information, which we think is important, and gives it a title of my report. And then we're looping through the list of IDs that we pass through. And so for each ID, we're saying, I want to get the output data from this condition ID. If it doesn't exist, I want to run the condition and then ultimately get the output data back. Next, I want to add a paragraph, which has the heading 1 style applied to it. And I'm going to add it with the condition name, and on a new line with the words my summary. Next, we're creating a table, and this is one of our pre-written tables, which is a trim and stability summary, which is the exact same one that you see in the main UI. And we're passing in the output information to ultimately fill in that table. Next, we're actually adding that table to the document. and then finally adding a page break to move on to the next condition. And so again, a very simple script, but this sort of gives the idea of the building blocks and adding on to the document from top down. And really the final important block of any of our scripts really is this testing block. And so this is used to actually test reports directly within the Python editor. It's keyed off with this first line here of the if name equals main. And so what we're doing is if we're running within the Python editor, we're saying I want to get a listing of condition IDs. And so this show get condition IDs will give a pop-up with the condition tree and checkboxes to be able to select the different conditions. And we're saying if the list is essentially not empty, we want to start our report, which is important for any of our reports to start the report. Then we call that create report method to add on to the report with all the paragraphs and tables. And then this final line here, rec.show, actually saves out a temporary version of the document and opens it in Word or whatever your default docx editor is. And so this testing block is a good way to directly in the Python editor, run a script, test it, see what's working, what's broken, and quickly make changes before ultimately bringing it into the print panel and using it consistently. Okay, that sort of wraps up the presentation side of this webinar. So now I want to move into HECSTAB itself and actually start looking at these reports and showing what samples we've built up for you to use. And so I have HECSTAB open here, working just off of our demo tanker, which is installed with our tutorials. I have the actual tutorial project loaded up, which sort of gives my condition tree with output. So I have some intact conditions here. I've applied some damage down the tree, and I have a further stranding and sort of lightering condition at the end, flowing with the tutorial. So right from here, say I want to get a listing of condition summaries for all my intact cases. First, I'll show it on the print panel side. I can just go to File, Print. And we sort of rework this print panel a little bit to get rid of a lot of the older Flex report options and buttons and replace it with ones more focused on the Python script reporting. I'm going to go to Browse for a report. And again, with our shipped sample, our installed samples, we've restructured this reports folder quite a bit. We've sort of condensed down the different categories now into just the idea of single condition reports, cross condition reports, and model reports. And we'll look at these three main ones. So I wanted to just start off with a condition summary, and we'll work with that. This button here, which kind of existed before, is again our condition picker, and I can go in and select the conditions I want. So I wanted to do only the intacts. And so this will pass these into my report for generation. We'll let that load on the side, and I'll actually bring it up side by side with the editor so we can walk through both of them to kind of look at what each line in the code sort of corresponds to. So I'll bring my report on the right and my script on the left. And so you can see, at least in our condition summary, there's quite a bit more to it. But as you said, at the very top, we have the import statements with the different libraries that we need for this report. We have some helper functions here. This add graphic one we'll get back to, and the add report. We have the create report method that we were looking for, and the testing block at the end. So within the print panel, we're looking directly for this create report. And so with the selected condition IDs from the tree, this is what gets passed in. So to start, we look, if we have more than one condition ID, we have the table of contents we can see here. And this is driven and keyed off of the heading levels and styles. And so you'll see we have the condition names and each of the summary parts that we're adding to our, what we call our main condition summary. And so after that, we had a page break and we began looping through our condition IDs. We get our output out and then ultimately go into this helper add report function. So in looking at add report, we add what we call our default header. And so you can see we add some of the license information. So the company name, we add the ship name and its last save date. We add the program name and the version that the report was written off of, and some date and the title that we specified within the header. And the same thing on the bottom, we add a footer, and our default footer adds just the condition name again, the path to the condition within the tree, and then the created modified date of the project itself, and finally the name based on the license. After we add our headers and footers, we start working, we said top down. We add a paragraph with the heading 1 style, which has the condition name. We add this text here, the trim and stability summary, with a lower down heading level. And then we move into another helper function, the add graphic one, which is ultimately setting up our some options here for the camera to create the 3D view, add the profile view, and add the plan view to our document. And we do that here with first the create pictures, which is a report API function. And then to get this sort of layout, what we've done is we've created a 2x2 table, and we're actually adding those pictures to the different cells of the table. And so we've created a table here, we've added them, and ultimately we add the table with this add block function, and then just add a line break to space it off. And so that's it for the graphics at the top. We move back to our add report. So here we now start adding our TNS summary. So we have our TNS summary table, and you'll notice here that we have that we're bringing this condition and TNS summary, and that sort of flows with our default library. And what we've tried to do, especially with these single condition reports, is build up different smaller chunks within each file, which, while they can stand alone and stand on their own as single reports, these can ultimately get added to each other to create, in this case, our condition summary report. And so what we've done is we've taken, in each case, the TNS summary, alarm summary, or weight summary, and move the actual table building into these files. And so you can sort of do the same thing within your own reports and either move these around or customize the TNS summary or any of these other summaries to your liking to be able to use in your own reports. I'll just quickly continue going through this, and then we'll move into the Python editor, or into the into the fuller Python editor to do some actual editing to show how that can be done. So we've added the TNS summary here. Just moving through quickly, we now add, and you see the alarm summary with the heading, the first table, and then within the alarm summary, we're actually adding in the information for the top level alarms. So the writing arm criteria, this one had an intact or a required GM curve and some strength allowable information. Next part, we add the weight summary. So just by groups and also the more detailed individual loads. We have the writing arm summary here, which is a simpler one without the criteria. And finally, at the bottom, we add our strength summary. And then once that's done, we come back to our create reports and we keep looping through each of the condition IDs we passed in. So this becomes the next condition summary for this condition, the fuel oil burn off. So say within just the condition summary we ship, we want to see centers information for our detailed loads. What we can do is, I'll close out of this and bring HECSTAB back to full, is we can now open our sort of main Python script editor, and I'll go to File, Open, and I'll open both the weight summary and the condition summary, since those two are linked. So within the weight summary, this bigger, we have some setup here for both our load table by group and also our load table showing the more detailed loads. That's some helper information. And you can see down at the bottom here, we have the same condition weight summary add report method corresponding to the add report method within the weight summary. You can see what that's doing is it's adding first that top level one with the groups, then it's getting the load groups from the vessel, and then for each group, showing that detailed load summary. And if we want to say add different columns to that table, one way we can do it is to just edit the default ones that or what we say are the default ones within that group. And so I'll go up here and say, I just want it just for the tanks. I can change this list here. I'll copy this and say, I want to add the LCG, TCG, and VCG. So I'll save that and come back to my condition summary. And now I'll run this just for one condition. We'll say just the departure one. We'll come load through, and when it hits the weight summary, what it actually does is it updates with our changes there. And now for our loads, which are categorized as tanks, you can see we now have the centers in that detailed load summary. So we found that this sort of table approach is very customizable to what users want, or to however the user wants to lay out their tables. There are some of the more complex ways to edit these. You can see here what we're doing when we've created this detailed load table. We're setting this properties names, or this parameter called property names, and we're just getting it from the default property names. Instead, what we could do is actually set up this table within the condition summary and get the property names that we want and do it directly within the condition summary here. So there are quite a few ways of changing this up. Another quick one that I wanted to show in the condition summary before moving on to a different report type is that we've also introduced the concept now of having different reporting units from the actual display units. So say you prefer working within HECSTAB, within the metric system, but for submittal, you actually need reports written for the imperial system. So now if I come into my, I'll just do it within the add report method here. We can come in and do rep dot for the report API, and I'll type in rep dot units. And so this is basically a full set of the same display options from HECSTAB, but will now be applied only to the report. And so I'll do this and I'll say apply unit system defaults. And I've brought in the way our unit system is set up. You need this unit system, and I've given a short name of US. Say US dot, I want the just general our default imperial system. So now I can come in and run. It'll ask me to save. Just again, do a single condition here. If I now run this report, you'll now see that this report now has all of our values converted to the imperial system while we're still running with the metric system. If I have something with metric data, there we go. With the metric system data still showing in our main UI. That's kind of a quick whirlwind view of the single condition summary reports. Next, while I still have this model and condition open, I want to show something new that we've really been working on, which is the idea of the model-based reports. And so if you're familiar with a lot of the data coming from SPE, we have the options there of printing out, say, the hydro tables, cross-curve tables, and such. And we wanted to bring that system into HECSTAB as well. And so we'll look in the model, now the model category of the reports, and we have a lot of those same tables here, or a lot of those same reports here available now to print directly from HECSTAB. And really the two ones of focus are this one, the model table summary, and the model geometry summary. And they differ mainly in that the model table summary is going to just directly grab the tables from the vessel model and put them into a report. I'll let this load up. These ones take a little bit more since they're a lot larger reports. There we go. So we have the model summary, and this is something we started to build up for doing, say, a TNS summary, or doing a full like TNS report booklet. And so I'll try to briefly scroll through this, starting with the table of contents at the top. We start off with a picture of the vessel. You can see we still have some to-do items to make this a really solid model summary. And then kind of another one of the things we've been trying to work on is improved plotting. And so this is just one example of it, where we now show the plot of the hydro table, some of the values from our hydro table. And so this is the hydro table directly from the model, just an untrimmed one. You can see we have plotted on the x-axis our displacement, and on the two y-axes we have moment to trim, the KMT, and then on the right, the LCB and LCF. And again, this is just our default. These properties that you want to show in the hydro table plots can be changed within the script. Continuing on in the cross curve table, which is fairly messy since there are a lot of drafts in this one. Also the bond genes, again, very messy since there are a lot of drafts here, and I think a lot of stations too in the model. Oops. This one, the capacity plan, just with the plan view of the vessel, and then the capacities and the capacity centers of these tanks. And then the as written tank tables and a plot of them. So that's the model table summary. And the second one is the model geometry summary, which is written kind of directly with the vessel geometry and generating the tables on the fly. And so what I'll do is I'll run this one. You can see here we start off and actually show pop-up entries to be able to customize this report. So we can say we want to show a hull summary at the draft of 16 meters. We can actually define the drafts we want for our hydro tables and cross curve tables. I'm going to delete some of these just to shorten them up. We'll do 4 to 26 in steps of 1. We have the heel angles for the cross curves. We'll keep just this short list. And then finally, we have the step size for the tank tables, and I'll shorten this up to 1 meter, should be okay. And so now what this is doing is it's using the ship API actually to generate these tables on the fly. Might take a little longer since it has to actually do all those hydro calcs. Well, this is Lynn here. Rick, I see your question about headers and footers. The extent that the default headers and footers can be customized is just as I showed there with that single title string in the header. If you wanted to create completely on your own your own headers and footers, just doing a add header, there's helper functions there for creating ones completely on your own for that. Oh, this one takes a while. There we go. So now we have, again, another model summary, but now directly using the geometry from the vessel and using the parameters we specified within the inputs. Again, we start off with the same sort of isometric view of the vessel. Now we look at the hull summary, and you can see here we've generated the values with our 16-meter draft, just showing some of the bounds and any of the spaces attached to the hull. Now looking at our hydrostatic table, which we've generated on the fly, you can see we're using the drafts that specified within that pop-up from 4 to 26. The KN curves, also following that with the corresponding displacements and the shorter list of heel angles. The bond genes, now with the shorter draft listing. Same sort of capacity plan, and a bit nicer compartment details now instead of just the tank plot and table, showing an actual graphic of the compartment isolated on its own, where it's spaced in the model in plan and profile view, some basic information, and then the tank tables with our specified images. And so that's kind of the bigger model summary reports. Again, these ones are also set up to be able to build on each other and kind of see that toward the end. So you can move these parts around within the model summary. You can add to them directly within the individual reports that we ship, or you can remove parts that you don't need within the model summary.
Brandon, there was a chat request about the reference point for the output tables. Do you want to touch on the display options and how you can change and edit that as well?
Oh, yes. So again, that's one of the benefits of having the reference settings, or with having the display options directly available in the report API. Have to remember how to access reference points with units. So at the top, it's I guess within the create report, really, it's going to be rep units. Forget if it's one of these. It's not. I think it's, you have to go into the unit format dictionary. Basically, you're going to be going through the dictionary, and I think you have to get the unit corresponding to X, so the X location, and then change the reference to there. That's something I'll have to investigate separately and come back to.
That would
But
be
it should be
to
accessible.
that would be to customize the format directly in the report. Otherwise,
Right.
if you don't have any of those, it will just default to the display options that you have set in the UI, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
So yes, the quicker way would be to just go back to the UI, change the reference point, and then come back and create the report. But if you want to do it just for the report, the way to do it would be to go through the unit display options.
Excellent. Okay. Sounds like we might want to have an example of that put into our example data at some point.
Okay, kind of the final one we wanted to show. At least from our samples, is the idea of the cross condition reports. And so what I'm bringing in here is a new project, kind of built up with a template for our CargoMax DDS, which is what the direct damage stability we ship with our loading computers. So the project I have here is formatted in a similar way that we do our DDS reports. I have a loading condition at the very top, which is just the standard loading condition that we're looking at. I have a condition down below, which adds the appropriate writing arm criteria and applies the regulatory permeabilities. Although I just have the same permeabilities for all of them, this one. And then below that, our whole list of the damage cases that we're looking at for this vessel. And this was generated with our analysis pack, one of our analysis packages, the damage case generation tools. And for this one, I did just the IGC damage cases. And so you can here, I'll go to browse for a report. Not this one, but the one from our actual DDS package. I'll have the one-line summary of the IGC sort of summary, which sets up a list of properties for our one-line summary table. I'll select all the damage cases from the condition tree, run the report, and this is the result of what we get out for our own DDS. And so we have at the very top level just a legend explaining each of the properties that we're going to be showing in our one-line summary. Then moving down, we have our actual one-line summary table for all our conditions. So running across the top, within the script, we set up the columns that we want. If from the writing arm criteria, if we have any restrictions or requirements for certain properties, we actually show that here in this line. So we have restrictions on the heel, the freeboard to downflood, and center moving forward. And then going down the actual one line for each condition. You'll see some of these marked in blue. That's something that we do internally on our side, tracking the worst case condition for each of these requirements. So one of these blue requirements is going to be the worst case damage case for, say, the heel. So it'll be the one that's I guess, closest to 30 degrees of heel. And that'll be true for each of these requirements. And we can see a listing of that at the very last page, which is a listing of just the worst cases. And so this is a very quick summary to look at what's going to be the worst cases for a given loading condition. What are the worst cases for a loading condition for each of the requirements for criteria? Colin. Yes, Colin, I'll actually move on to that right now. So the last thing I want to touch on is now taking some of these smaller bits and pieces and actually compiling them into a much fuller report. And so I'll go back to the tutorial project for this to load. And so as I mentioned, we've tried to build up our samples to be used as sort of also as building blocks to create your own reports. One that we've been trying to work with the client on is creating full stability report from these different pieces. And so I have just a sample stability report, and we can look at that here. So this one is a much larger create report function method, but we're doing sort of the same things. First, we're adding a header, this one being, as I mentioned, Rick, the more custom headers. And so we're adding name at the top, a new line, the company name, the address. We're putting a title in, and we're adding a date and some other document information into the header. Then we're coming in and first creating a title page. And so we add some carriage returns here to get to the center of the document, and then start building up the headings. I'll actually let this run in the background while talking over the script. And I'll try to do the same thing of having these side by side. There we go. So here you're doing the rep dot adding a heading. So we're adding the heading here with the ship name and a subtitle that we give. A lot of these functions, the ones where we're adding, say, paragraphs or tables, return the actual object itself. Like I said, we do have the full sort of external library behind. And so you'll see on the next line here, we're actually saying, I get the paragraph back and I want to center this within the document horizontally. A lot of these options, I meant to show it in the help. So if we say add, and go to add heading 1. And so this is our pop-up help document here. And there's a bit more, and you'll see at the top, we have the Gembox namespaces. If I wanted to look at what's available for the paragraph, I can actually click on it within the help editor. It'll bring me to the information for the paragraph object. It's actually going to be listed under paragraph formats. And we can look at the different options that are available for the paragraph format. And so we've come in and said, I want to take my paragraph object, and within the formatting options of that paragraph, I want to set the alignment, and I want to set it to the center value, which is another object within Gembox, which is their horizontal alignment. And so one of the options being the center one. Rick, yes, they can be inputs. And that's one of the things I was starting to do here for this client, which this is using the same sort of analysis template approach for getting these values. And if you use the analysis templates, you'll sort of recognize this pop up here where I can enter in, say I want this as I want that as a tanker stability report. I want to up that to version 2. I think this part was still not working when I was testing it. I was still trying to play around with this. There it is. Yep. So came in with, I guess in this case, I was editing the header. So I changed that from VLCC demo to tanker and up the revision number, but you can do the same sort of thing with titles and really other parts of the document with the same sort of analysis template approach. I'll running a bit out of time, so I'll try to step through this quickly. After the title page, we add a table of contents. Here you can see a lot of this information, a lot of these sentences are just hard-coded or hard written in. We're adding a heading, adding a paragraph here with the ship name, showing its principal dimensions, saying some other sort of boilerplate information for our documents. Here we're actually getting out the light ship values for our vessel and showing it in the table. Adding in within our report API, there's the option to add these list items, which are bulleted. You can see the same approach of setting up the view options for adding in pictures. Here we're coming in and we're bringing a wind profile plot. And finally adding in, if I get down to it, for the past in IDs, the condition summary. And in here, looks like the condition summary that we had before. I think I wanted to change around the order of some items here, which is why I just copied and dropped it into this report script. We keep going down past the actual summary information. Finally, at the end of the document, I've come in and actually brought in the hydro tables and the KN curves for this vessel, and appended them to the end of this document. And so it's just kind of a quick way to take all the different pieces and samples that we've provided and ultimately compile them into your own report, which is kind of the aim of what we wanted when we built up the sample library, to have different smaller chunks and pieces. And if you do end up wanting any help with creating these report scripts, we're more than happy to assist in, especially the more complex parts of combining larger libraries together or obtaining more specific vessel information to add into your report. Feel free to contact us and we're more than happy to help with that. I'm a bit over my time, but that's really it for what I wanted to highlight and go over for our enhanced customized reporting. From that, we'll turn it over for any of the questions.
Excellent, Brandon. Yeah, there was one other that came in just recently talking about actual language support, and I think the answer is anything that you show in here where it's kind of highlighted in red, that's text. That could be in whatever language you want to type in. Some of the tables and values coming out of HECSTAB might not have direct language support, but there's lots of things that we can do to assist that, I guess. And longer term, we are looking at a more generic multi-language support within the software package itself.
I think for
So
this,
one example of that is we actually do have some German on that first page there.
yeah, this was for a German client, and I tried to clean out most of the information here, but some of the German stuck through.
That's fine.
But yes, that's shown here, this red text here.
Okay. Does anyone else have any other questions? Feel free to put them into the chat or the Q&A section. And I think everything's been coming through the chat so far. So I appreciate everyone giving feedback and questions. I think this has gone very well, Brandon. Do you have an example of a bit of Python code producing output from user input data?
I'll get back to you on that one, Rick, and I'll send you a sample script with that. It should be pretty simple to get whatever your input data is using the HECSTAB API first, and then adding that to Sierra report.
Okay, well, thank you once again, Brandon. I think you did an excellent job here. For everyone that's been in attendance, we'll process this and we'll put it available on our YouTube page and available for download off of our website, and we'll pass along links to others. And as Brandon said, you know, we're really positive and really looking forward to seeing what we can do and how we can help our clients put together some really neat reports and also try to automate and streamline this process for, you know, repetitive tasks and things going forward. So keep an eye out for our updates and our new releases going forward. And thank you very much for your time.